Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for joining me once again. I'm the Down with Doug and this is Getting Down with Doug. Now, I've made some changes and that's why I've been away for so long is I've been trying to think of ways I can better do this, and I thought there's two possible changes I could make, and I've done both. One, if you're listening to this, you can now listen and watch it if you want on YouTube. It'll be a video on there under the same name, Getting Down with Doug. So go check it out if you want to see what I look like and what the recording area is like for me. If you like to watch things like me, then that's the place to catch me from now on. The second change is probably more notable, and that's that I want to change the type of content I want to do. I want to streamline things so it serves the community better. I've been listening to a lot of Seth Godin, and he's talking consistently about doing things that matter to people who care. So it's all about finding a community. Now, I'm already lucky enough to be part of several communities, but one I'm quite keen on, one that's been a big part of my life, is the film and TV industry, and I want to serve that community as best I can. How best I can do it, in my understanding of things, is through health and well-being. It's a service that I feel like is totally underserviced. We spend millions on COVID, zero on mental health. There's 0.1 cases of COVID, there's 1 in 4 cases of mental health. Doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm going to do what I can through this platform to try improve that and give you some better understanding of mental health, things that you can do for yourself on set or off that can enrich your life, hopefully. Currently, I feel like the health and well-being part of TV and film is given less respect than an extra cutting the queue at Craft and ordering like 57 lattes, 3 of them being oat, 2 of them being soy, and the rest being whatever. You get the point. That's also some of the film-like humor you can come to expect on this channel. Don't leave just yet, please. So that is where I'm coming from to do these videos and these podcasts from now on. However, if there is a subject that you think needs to be covered, then hit me up. I'm available on yoga@thedownwithdoug.com and also on Instagram @thedownwithdoug. So let me know what you think we should be covering. There's a cat really misbehaving. 1 second. All right, so let's dive into this week's episode with this new format. Let's turn that on silent first. So with this new format, let's get into this week's episode. Now, you know as well as I do if you work in the industry that the hours can be brutal. You know when you start, which is pretty early, but you don't always know when you finish, and those hours can really drag. It also leads to you missing a lot of dinners, dates, weddings, even delivery services, whatever the case may be. Now, those things get a lot worse when you get charged with the task of having to do a night shoot. That really changes everything. And if you're anything like me, after the night shoot, I feel really weird. Kind of like in Fight Club, he describes how you're never quite asleep or awake and you don't know which one you are at any given time. I kind of feel a little bit dissociated from myself. It's like I've got a really bad come down or being horrendously jet lagged. Now, that's just my experience. If you feel the same, then this is going to be a great podcast/video for you. However, if you feel like you do these night shoots and it's no big deal when you don't sleep the full 8 hours as recommended, then have I got news for you. In this episode, we're going to talk about why we sleep, the dangers of not sleeping enough, and what you can do when you are charged with the task of doing a night shoot to prepare for that night shoot to get through it as healthily as possible. Now, that's not about always feeling the best as possible, although those two things should be linked, but quite often we can feel fine but be doing some pretty bad damage for our future selves. So that's what we're going to cover in today's episode. Let's start with why sleep is so important. Now, this is a field that has blown up recently, mainly because of the popularity of a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which is a great read, and it's where I get a lot of the information from. So if you want to check it out yourself, have a read of it and enjoy. There's some great tips in there, which I'm going to try to cover, but if I miss anything, it's all in there. This whole field has really erupted, and we know a lot more about sleep because of the work of people like Matthew Walker. It may be attractive to think that you just go unconscious when you sleep, but that is not the case. You go through some very specific processes, both in your body and in your brain. And without sleep, you get into all sorts of sticky situations where things are malfunctioning because those parts aren't getting the repair that they need from these processes. So what are some of those ways that the body and mind react to sleep? Well, first you need to understand that there is 4 stages to sleep, numbered 1 to 4. Not very imaginative, I know. The first 3 stages are non-REM sleep. The last stage is called REM sleep, and that's your deeper sleep, which you only get into in the second half of your sleep. And that's why sleeping 8 hours is so important. If you only sleep 4 or 5, you never really get to that good REM sleep. Let's try and understand what happens in those stages in a bit more detail. In stages 1 to 3, your heart rate drops right down, your breathing slows down, your blood pressure goes down, your muscles all relax. The result is that things can now start to get repaired. Much like a highway can only get repaired when cars stop actually going on it, your muscles can only repair when they are stopped being used by you. Your muscles are hard just like the rest of your muscles, and it needs that break. Especially if you're someone who has chronic or intense levels of stress in your life, your heartbeat is probably at a much higher rate than normal and than it should be, and sleep is one of the only times everything calms down. You can think of sleep like a really good blood pressure drug. It brings everything down, but you don't have any of the side effects. Now, what happens if we don't get that rest? Well, what you see during daylight savings is that there's a 24% increase in heart attacks on the first day that we lose an hour of sleep. We then see a 21% decrease of heart attacks when we get that hour of sleep back. It's found now that in the most recent studies that there's a 200% increase of heart attacks and strokes if you don't get enough sleep. If you get less than 5 hours sleep, you increase your chance of heart attack or stroke by 200%. While in these stages 1 to 3, the brain is also slowing down and we see a real dip in the brainwave function in between stages 1 and 3. However, stage number 4, your REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, that's what REM sleep is. It's the name of a great band, but also the fact that your eyes twitch while you're dreaming. A lot of great things happen during this time, and we want to get as much time in this REM sleep as we can. One of those things that happens is memory consolidation and memory priming. You can understand it like this. When your brain starts to emit these brain waves, the hippocampus, which is a part of your brain that looks a little bit like a seahorse, not as much as neuroscientists like you to believe, but this part vibrates every time you remember or put something to long-term memory. The brain waves elicit this vibration of the hippocampus, which I think has to be at like 15 to 20 hertz. That takes these memories that you had during the day and puts them into long-term memory. If you're someone who works in the film industry, then you may need working memory. I would hope so. You may have to remember what to do, where you put things, what needs to be done, when and where. And this is all down to working memory. If you don't get enough sleep, just one night of not enough sleep, you have a reduction of 40% of your working memory. That's a hell of a lot. That's almost half of your working memory is gone when you don't have one good night's sleep. When you do a night shoot, often that first night, you don't get a good night's sleep. You don't get much sleep, if any. So you're reducing your capacity for working memory by 40%. That is massive. If you're someone who thinks, well, I don't care because I don't need much working memory, I'm just a stunt guy, I'm just a rigger, I just need to do physical things, well, you're wrong, because muscle memory is included in that memory. So when we learn, for instance, a choreo as a stunt guy, your ability to remember that comes down to how good night's sleep you had before you learned the choreo and what a good night's sleep you had after learning the choreo. Since I have your stunt guy's attention, well, hopefully, and I know a lot of you guys struggle with attention, and that's something maybe we can deal with at a later stage, but keep in mind that you're also more susceptible to feeling pain after you've had a disrupted night's sleep. If you don't get your full complement of sleep, you actually increase your susceptibility to pain by 126%. That means on a night shoot, you're more likely to forget your choreo, but also to feel it when you hit the ground and be less likely to hit the ground than you would be on a normal day shoot. Sleep plays an important role in our emotions too, and there's a couple of processes that facilitate that. While we sleep in this REM sleep cycle, which is our rapid eye movement, you can kind of see the twitching behind the eyes when we sleep. You see it in dogs and cats too. But when we go into this section of our sleep, what we're doing is having these vivid memories and emotions come up. That's because the limbic system really fires up and the prefrontal cortex, which we'll talk about later, quietens down. It allows the limbic system, the emotional part of your brain, to really erupt. What we get is all these visions in our brain that somehow describe emotional states we're in and help us process them. You can think about it as threatening things coming about in non-threatening ways. So that's why you have like an elephant with a bow and arrow or a dog riding a skateboard. Maybe that's just me. However, all of those visions help us deal with these emotions in a way that's a lot more palatable. So instead of just storing them away in places that we never deal with, during our sleep, when the prefrontal cortex is quiet, but the limbic system is loud, we get to actually go through these things that have happened in our day and get through this process. It's the same concept behind why we use hallucinogens for depression and anxiety for people that don't react to the normal SSRIs or antidepressants. It's because when they can go through these things, when they're able to confront their fears, anxieties, and demons, they come out a lot better. And that's what you're having every night you go to sleep. You're going through that process. It's like very cheap therapy. So keep that in mind. Emotionally, when we're asleep, we're having to deal with these things and we're coming out better for it.
Sleep plays an important role, not just in our emotional function while we sleep, but also when we're awake. And to understand this, you may need to understand a little bit of neuroscience, but I'm going to film and TV industry it up so you can understand better. We already discussed that there's this prefrontal cortex. Now this part of your brain is like the command center. It's in psychology what they call the executive function. It takes in all the information from all the different places, your body, your organs, your sensations, your hearing, your vision, all of it, and then decides what's important and what's not. All of these things are always shouting at it, but it is deciding what to listen to. And that's an important key feature of the prefrontal cortex. You can think about it like a great first AD. The first AD has his earpiece in and he's listening to every department demanding things from him all the time, but he has to decide which ones to listen to, which ones to suppress, and where to allocate resources to best serve the needs of the production. Now that's a great first AD. On the other hand, we have this other part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala's function is to just tell us that there's threat. There's threat here, there's threat there, you need to worry about this, worry about that. And that's its function. It does a great job at doing that. The prefrontal cortex has to suppress that. It has to know when to listen to it and when to ignore it. You can think about the amygdala as a really bad director, someone who's shouting all the time, demanding things to happen non-stop and not letting their crew sleep and just being a outright terror on set. The first AD has to manage that director in the same way the prefrontal cortex has to manage and suppress the amygdala. When you sleep, we've discussed, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, and that way the amygdala and the limbic system, all the emotions can pour out in these visions and in these hallucinations that we call dreams. When we wake up, the prefrontal cortex is now recharged and it can start to suppress the amygdala again. What we find is that when we don't sleep, the prefrontal cortex doesn't get its rest. In the same way, if a first AD doesn't get its rest, it can't control the director. The prefrontal cortex can't control the amygdala. So the amygdala just fires and we feel like there's more threat than there really is. We feel more emotionally reactive than we should be because we have this amygdala or this director shouting out. So that's why the prefrontal cortex is important and why it's important that you sleep to give it a rest so that you don't get the amygdala firing all the time. It's probably quite unsurprising then that we find that insomniacs are 10 times more likely to be depressives and that depressives are 75% more likely not to get a good night's sleep compared to the average Joe. It's also probably the reason you or your colleagues are jerks on or during night shoots. We already said that sleeping is a great time to repair and recuperate, but one way in which we do that is by getting rid of harmful things that accumulate while we're awake. One such thing is called beta amyloids, and these are sticky, toxic proteins. Despite sounding like something on a bad catering menu, these are in fact the things that cause Alzheimer's and dementia. Why should you worry if you're a young, fit person? Well, the fact is you get the onset of Alzheimer's and dementia in your 20s and 30s. It shows up much later in cognitive decline and repeating yourself, but in fact, you start making the headway into this disease when you're much younger. So if you don't want to start forgetting things later, you need to remember to sleep. If COVID has taught us anything, it's the fact that our immune system is all important to our health and safety as well as our ability to work. It may be interesting to note then that if you sleep 4 to 5 hours, you reduce your natural killer cells by 70%. Now, what the hell are natural killer cells? Well, they are basically the special forces of your immune system. Think about little Ross Upton cells. They go around your system looking for cancer cells and they kill them on contact. Now, if you don't sleep enough, you don't have many of these, which increases your ability and your chances of getting cancer. So much so that the World Health Organization, the WHO, have decided that night shoots or night shifts are probably carcinogenic. What types of cancers may you get into? Bowel cancer, prostate cancer, and breast cancer. So that means regardless of how you identify, you're in trouble if you don't sleep enough. Men in particular, you should listen up. If you're only sleeping 5 hours, then you have smaller testicles than those people that sleep 7 hours. If you think size doesn't matter, no judgment, then it may be interesting to note too that you have the testosterone levels of someone 10 years older than you if you only sleep 5 hours a night. So men, make sure you're getting your sleep. But hey, maybe you've listened to all this and you're like, I don't care, I feel fine when I go to work. I'm just gonna drive, do my night shoot and drive home. Well, keep this in mind. If you sleep less than 5 to 6 hours, then you are 4.5 more times likely to have a car crash. If you sleep less than, But hey, maybe you've listened to all this and thought, I feel fine, I'm driving to work, I'm gonna do that night shoot and I'm gonna drive home. Everything's gonna be fine. Well, you may be interested to hear that if you sleep less than 5 to 6 hours, you're 4.5 times more likely to have a car crash. And if you sleep less than 4 hours, which is most of us on a night shoot on the first night, then you're 11.5 times more likely to have a crash. So as you can see, not getting enough sleep affects pretty much every part of your life, as well as every part of your body, from your cells all the way to how your brain works and how your body works. So that's the bad news. So what do we do about it? Well, when we work in night shoot, we have a real problem. We're not going to get a good night's sleep, and by the time we adjust the new schedule, we have to shift back onto days. So what are we going to do about it? Well, I'm glad you asked, because there's a solution, and there's in fact 2 solutions. The first way we can tackle this is by adjusting our circadian clock. Now, what is a circadian clock? It's basically the thing that tells us when to be awake and when to be asleep. It is independent of the world around us. It's endogenous. It comes from within. It comes from a pretty cool cell in the top of your mouth called your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a great name. And it tells us that we should be sleeping or we should be awake, regardless of what is happening around us. And we know this because we put people in caves, or a lot of them chose to go in caves, be in complete darkness, and they still followed a wake-sleep cycle in what is known as a diurnal pattern. We are diurnal because we're not nocturnal. We live during the day, we like to be out during the day, but literally we're awake and asleep in a pattern. The problem with the circadian pattern is that circadian, by definition, means approximate day. That's because our circadian pattern when we go into these caves is 24.2 hours, not 24 hours. That means every 5 days, we are out by an hour. How do we adjust and how do we make sure that we don't go out by an hour? Well, inbuilt into us are these things called Zeitgebers, which is another great name. Zeitgebers are these exogenous things that correct our time. They're the things that tell us when it is time to sleep and when it is time to be awake, that are outside of us. They are things like eating, exercise, and light. That's probably the most important thing. Light and temperature, which is another very important thing. This is great news. So between our suprachiasmatic nucleus and these Zeitgebers, we can actually change our circadian pattern, and we can change being from day-night people to night-day people if we do the right things, importantly, at the right times. So listen up. So on a night shoot, what we're looking to do is called phase delay. That basically means we want to delay when we go to bed and we want to delay when we want to wake up. The same can be done to phase advance, which means we wake up earlier and go to bed earlier. All it matters is that we do certain things at certain times. Those certain things are called Zeitgebers, as we described before, things you can do that can change your circadian pattern. And the other important thing is knowing when to do them, which relates to something called your temperature minimum. What the hell is your temperature minimum? I'm glad you asked. Your temperature minimum is just when you are coldest in your day. Turns out temperature is the thing that regulates when we're awake and when we're asleep. What we find is that we are usually our coldest 2 hours before we wake up. So if your general waking up time is 6 a.m., like it is for a lot of people that do work in film and TV, then your temperature minimum is going to be at 4 a.m. Now, the period that we're worried about is 4 to 6 hours after that temperature minimum and the 4 to 6 hours before the temperature minimum. If we do things in those 4 to 6 hours just after our temperature minimum, we tend to phase advance. We wake up earlier and we want to go to bed earlier. If we do things that we've described, and we will go into detail, 4 to 6 hours before our temperature minimum, we will phase delay. We'll want to go to bed later and we'll want to wake up later. Now, what are those things? Well, there are things like eating, there are things like ice bars, things about intensely exercising, and things like light. And light is probably the most potent of all of those. The only thing they all have in common is they increase our body temperature, which means our temperature minimum will shift in accordance. So let's go through an example together But keep in mind, light is going to be the most important thing here. For that reason, I would suggest getting yourself a bright lux light. So just a quick bit about how much light we should be expecting to get. The laptop you may be watching this on gives off roughly about 10 lux. If you go outside on a cloudy day, it's about 50,000 lux. And if you go outside on a sunny day, it's 100,000 lux. So that gives you an idea of the variety. Since you're going to want a phase delay, I would suggest getting a handheld light that can be sold on Amazon. There's tons, and the link will be in the bio for some options. And this thing is just handheld. You can put it next to you and you can get that lux, whether it's 10,000, which is the recommended amount that we're looking at to shift ours, by putting it on just for a few minutes. Follow the directions in any product you have and they'll tell you exactly how to do that. But that's the thing I suggest doing. You can also do the other things. Intense exercise, ice baths, and eating will also do a similar thing, but light is really the potent thing that we're looking at using. So let's go through an example together. So in this example, I'm going to show you how you can, if you know you have a night shoot on the Monday, can shift your circadian pattern from day to night over the weekend. In 36 hours, you can pretty much change yourself from waking up at 6 a.m. to now waking up at 3 p.m., which is going to be a lot more handy for you since that's usually the periods in which we're going to work. These are examples, approximations. So if you have earlier start time or later start time, you can build that in to this too. So let's check out how this works. So temperature minimum, what the hell is it? We've already described. It's the coldest you're going to be during the day, and it's usually 2 hours before you wake up. You can work that out by just averaging over the last 3, 4, or 5 days what time you normally wake up, even if that's with an alarm clock. So we've said before, the example we're going to use is that you wake up most days at around 6 a.m. Your temperature minimum, 2 hours before that, 4 a.m. So you go about your day on that Friday, you go to work, you come back from work. Now, this is important. That first Friday, what you need to do is start your phase delay. You'll get home and usually about 10 o'clock, you'll start to get sleepy because the average time of being awake to feeling sleepy is 14 hours, and that's 10 a.m. 10 a.m. is also 4 to 6 hours before your temperature minimum, which is 4 a.m. So we want to look at this time and go, right, normally I'm getting ready for sleep, and normally they're telling me not to view light or blue light on your phone, all the things they tell you not to do before you go to bed, you can do them. It's kind of like this secret naughty habit that you can have in play. It's kind of like you get to be a teenager whose parents are away for that night. So I need you to stay awake till about 1 o'clock. In order to help phase delay, what I want you to do is start to view light. As I said, those handheld lights of 10,000 lux are the best. If you can get ones with lower lux, that's fine. You just may have to go up a little bit longer. Follow the instruction, it'll tell you how to get your 10,000 lux. That's just a measurement of how much light you're receiving in your eyes. Now, if you can view that light as the 10, 11, 12 o'clock comes by, then great. You're going to start to delay your sleep time. Already you would have gone to bed normally at 10. Now you're going to try to go to bed at 1 o'clock, having viewed light, done exercise, had an ice bath, or maybe gone just for a meal. You can do a combination of these things, or you can just do one, but I suggest the light one because it's the easiest. Do that and you're going to phase delay nicely. You're going to go to bed at 1. You're going to sleep for 8 hours. You're going to wake up at 9. Now, your temperature minimum, don't forget, is 2 hours before you woke up. If you woke up at 9, 2 hours before is 7 a.m. That's Saturday morning. Now, go about your day normally. It's the weekend. Maybe you want to go out a little bit later than normal. Go do it. 14 hours after that, you're going to start to feel a bit sleepy, but that's a little bit later because yesterday you woke up at 6, today you woke up at 9. So 3 hours later, you'll feel a bit sleepier. So this is now 1 a.m., you'll start to get a little bit drowsy. You can now take the same protocol, view light, eat a meal, intense exercise, something like that. That'll keep you up a little bit later. You want to try get to bed now at around 3 o'clock. So before it was 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, you're starting to get ready for bed. 4 o'clock, you're going to sleep. 4 o'clock, you sleep your 8 hours. Guess what? Now it's 12 p.m. on Sunday. You wake up 12 p.m. Sunday. Let's do it again. 2 hours before that is your temperature minimum. That makes it 10 a.m. 10 a.m. is your temperature minimum. So 4 to 6 hours before that tonight, you want to start doing your phase delay protocol. The night before, you started that at 1 a.m. and you slept at 4 a.m. This time, you're going to start it at 4 a.m. and you're going to work all the way through, guess what, to 7 a.m. Okay, so now you've pretty much shifted. I would say every time you do this protocol, Try leave the last hour to get ready for bed. So stay awake that whole time, but you can start to get ready for bed an hour before, otherwise you may struggle to sleep altogether, and you don't want that, all right? So usually in that first 2 hours in your phase delays when you want to be doing this protocol. Intense exercise, ice bath, light exposure, which I suggest is the easiest thing to do. I would do that. So here we go. Monday morning, you've gone to bed at 7 a.m. You'll sleep 8 hours, which takes you when? To 3 p.m. You can then leave for work and you can start your night shoots because you are ready. Not haggard, not risking any heart disease, not risking any cancers, not risking any car crashes, going to work ready for the day. Go to work. Now you want to stay on this schedule. That's the important part here. Stay on the schedule that you've just created for yourself. Get home. Try go to bed at the same time every night that you're on that night shoot, which is normally 7 a.m., maybe a little bit earlier if you have to start earlier. Stay on that schedule. Consistency is key. When you're at work, if you need to stay awake during the time you're at work, you can use that handheld light because that's going to tell your eyes to increase your temperature, which is going to keep you awake. Now that's pretty incredible. There is a schedule you can follow. In 3 days, you can go from days to nights. It's amazing. Of course, you can alter it as you need to, but the important thing is 4 to 6 hours before your temperature minimum, you're doing these Zeitgeber protocols. They're going to keep you awake. Again, I suggest using the Lux handheld devices because I think they're very useful and very easy. It's a lot easier than taking an ice bath and a little bit more enjoyable. So when you finish your night shoots, now you need to go back to days. You can use the same protocol, this time using your phase advance. Remember, now it means when you wake up, as soon as you wake up, as soon as you can, view light, do intense exercise, eat, or have an ice bath because that's all going to increase your temperature and make you wake up earlier, the next day. Let's do it again. So there you have it. In just 36 hours, you've changed from day to night. You can use the same protocol when you want to go back to days. Don't forget this time, instead of doing it 4 to 6 hours before your temperature minimum, you're going to do it 4 to 6 hours after your temperature minimum, which means as soon as you wake up, much easier to remember. As soon as you wake up, start to view the light. You can do the intense exercise, you can do the ice bath, you can eat a meal. All of those things are going to increase your temperature and phase advance you, which means you're going to wake up earlier and go to bed earlier. That's the important thing. You're going to try to get back to days by Monday. So you can use the same protocol. Just don't forget, if you want to advance and wake up earlier, you do it 4 to 6 hours after your temperature minimum. If you want to do it to delay things, 4 to 6 hours before your temperature minimum. So that was the first way we're going to deal with doing night shoots, by getting ready before we even go there. The second thing I want you to do to make sure your night shoots don't disrupt you any more than they already have is by doing a few tips to make you sleep better. So let's check out those tips. Now, considering everything we've spoken about, it should come as no surprise that temperature and light are big factors when it comes to getting a good night's sleep. So let's deal with the first thing, temperature. The recommended temperature of a room is roughly 18.5 degrees. That is Celsius. What is in Fahrenheit? I have no idea. I don't know why anyone uses Fahrenheit for that matter. But you want to get it to 18.5. It feels cold, but as we discussed, you're coldest when you're asleep, so you can facilitate that by getting cold before you go to sleep. If you're in a hotel room, then get that set before you even come back. If you're at home and you have an aircon, get that set so when you come home, you're straight into bed, straight to sleep. You can also do this by having a hot shower or a hot bath. It seems paradoxical, but actually having a hot shower or hot bath reduces your body temperature, and having an ice bath increases your temperature. Remember, before bed, we're trying to get cold as possible. The next thing you should do is get your room dark. I suggest blackout blinds, eye masks, and the next thing I suggest is actually taping over all your standby lights on all your electronic devices. The reason for this is that although you need 10,000 lux to wake up and shift your circadian rhythm, you actually only need 8 lux to wake you up from your slumber. Now keep in mind your laptop is already 10 lux. So if that laptop comes on, that's how dim the light has to be to wake you up from your slumber. So take the time, get prepped, make sure your room is cold, make sure your room is dark. If you need an eye mask, the link is also in the bio. Now another sense that's very important is the sense of sound. Now, if production have given you a hotel, then do your best, go to the front desk, ask them really nicely to put you in the quietest room, away from the bar, away from the lobby, away from the car park. Those sounds can absolutely kill a good night's sleep. If you're staying at home, then maybe consider using the second bedroom, the garden office, or the lounge, or wherever you can get a good night's rest. Maybe even now is the time to get a hotel and treat it like a little holiday away. I say this because already we know that you're more emotionally reactive when you haven't had a good night's sleep. So two people that are not sleeping well are likely to have big fights. You don't want that. Keep in mind too that you're more susceptible to pain. So when your partner throws the alarm clock at you, you're going to feel it a lot more. Now, all the research says that once you go onto nights, you should really stay on nights for the next 14 days. Now, of course, that's not really in our remit or our ability to control, but if you're someone who's listening to this or watching this and do have some sway with producers, then I can't stress enough, try get them to put people on 14 days and do all the nights in one go and then flip, because the flipping from day to night and night to day can be harmful to the body, even if you use these protocols. So do your best if you can, if you're someone who has that power, put people on blocks of night shoots instead of in and out, in and out. Right, now we've spoken about what you should do to get a good night's sleep. What shouldn't you do to get a good night's sleep? Well, you shouldn't use alcohol, weed, or medication to get your sleep. Why? Well, we've already discussed that sleeping is a very specific set of processes. Now, those things will all put you to bed. They will get you to be unconscious, but you're sedated. You're not dreaming. You're not going through these beautiful processes that repair the body, repair the heart, repair the mind. You're just lying there unconscious. And you may think that's a great thing, but if you get used to that type of sleep, you're actually not resting, you're not recuperating, you're not getting any of the goodness that you get from getting a good night's sleep in the sleep pattern that we've described as non-REM and REM sleep. Another thing not to do is stay in bed if you're not sleeping. So if you've tried this protocol and you're not quite sleepy yet, and you're lying in bed, get out of bed when you notice it, come to another room, do something else for a while, as long as it's not too stimulating so you don't disrupt your sleep pattern too much, and keep it nice and dark. Do something, and then when you feel sleepy, go back to bed. That's because we're more like animals than we like to admit, but just like Pavlov's dog got used to a bell representing food, we can get used to associating our bed with not sleeping. And once that association is formed, going to bed is no longer a sleepy thing, it's an awake thing. So don't do that. And there you go. You are ready for night shoots now. You can use the protocol to get ready for the night shoot, and you can use the other protocols that get you to bed and keep you asleep for longer. Remember, light, temperature, very important things, so you use them to your advantage. If you enjoyed this, leave a comment, like the video. If you want to reach out to me and have any questions, don't forget yoga@thedownwithdog.com or check me out at Instagram @thedownwithdog. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon, hopefully not on a night shoot.